what is AI right now? It's the equivalent of a traditional education. Add in a load of context to what it's learning, and then it can understand context in terms of the communications that it's having, and then it can apply that rote learning to that context. But it can't create new knowledge. It's just a knowledge base that can understand human language context and attempts to apply that knowledge to that context. Your CV, the only job that it has is to get you through either the algorithm or the HR hiring manager who knows nothing about what the job really is and is reading your CV for keywords. So I rebuilt my CV on the basis of you are using AI in order to generate your idealized job spec for this role. Well, I can do that too.
Hi, my name is Ronan Kennedy, and this is the Ronan Kennedy Podcast. On this show, I'm going to be talking to professionals from various different careers, industries, and backgrounds to learn about what they do, how they do it, and how they got into it. So do you want to just tell the story, or do you want us to start from the start, or what's the?
Well, yeah. So we were just talking about the hiring process that I've been through.
Yeah.
That started off as a role in a company where they'd hired someone and then that person had turned out not to be the right person. And they went back out to 10 agencies, fired 2 people, we're going to go again. Then an agency got hold of me, and I could see from the CV that I had a load of relevant industry experience, but there were kind of 2 ways of coming at that role, kind of product management, and it was entitled a product management role, but also kind of product management, but from the DevOps side, so more of an operational platform side of things. So to try and set the context in that first interview, it was as soon as I came on, I was like, look, I've read the spec, and I just want you to understand which side of that am I coming from. I've come from the product side and not from the DevOps side. So if you're going to ask me DevOps background questions, then I'm not going to be the fit. Let's just establish that straight away, and then we can have a decent conversation. And well, okay. And I think that is going to be key for people in the way that the hiring process is going. In that AI is causing an enormous problem for the hiring process, in that for every job spec that goes out there, there's now thousands of applicants. And all of those 1,000 applications are highly credible because they've all been generated by AI.
Or they've been tailored by AI, right?
AI, yeah. To the point that it's difficult to differentiate or tell whether someone actually has that experience or whether it's just knowledge that they have, let's say, recently acquired.
Right. To put it politely.
To target that role.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, we can come back around on that whole thing perhaps later in the conversation. Let's carry on with this journey.
Right.
But I think by doing that, I set the scene for them in terms of this is us collaboratively working to identify whether I am the right fit for this role, rather than it being a kind of more, you're going to quiz me to try and decide whether I'm the right person.
And you're going to perform the best you can.
And all of that kind of thing. So I think hiring companies right now need that assistance. They need people who are going to go into the interview process with that mindset, because they've got this massive challenge of how do I, if you don't do that, you're setting yourself up where they are going to have to treat this as adversarial. What questions do I ask? And talking to other people around in the job market as well, you can see with how people are doing their hiring process, where they're not giving the information on what the role is. They're not giving the information on what their cultural environment is, who they're looking for. And then they're asking open-ended questions, and someone is answering that open-ended question honestly based on the thing, not knowing that it's actually completely the wrong answer.
Right. So that's just the response to the over-tailored approach with AI and
Yeah. So if I'm not giving you the information for you to tailor your response, and then I'm bringing you into an interview, and I am asking you that open question, like, if you were recruiting salespeople, what kind of thing would you look for in a salesperson? Well, that could be answered any range of ways. You might say, I'm looking for someone who's highly trustworthy, that, I'm not too worried about the skills, but as long as the trust is there, we can build on that. Or I might say, I'm looking for someone who's young, highly aggressive, results focused, and who only cares about the money.
so it's this new approach of getting to the truth of the story or to the candidate's real abilities as soon as possible, right?
I
By
think
asking
so.
those open-ended questions, because AI is kind of like this, it's a little bit over-tailored or manufactured maybe sometimes in some cases.
Yeah. And again, this is all, what is AI right now? Well, it's the equivalent of a traditional education is the best way of describing it. It can rote learn, and as part of that rote learning, you add in a load of context to what it's learning. And then it can understand context in terms of the communication that it's having, and then it can apply that rote learning to that context. But it can't create new knowledge. It's just a knowledge base that can understand human language context and attempts to apply that knowledge to that context.
Right.
So if you are giving it enough information about what the context is, it will come back with the answer. So I think what they're doing in the hiring process here, they're not in the early stages of that, they're not giving enough contextual information for you to go away and use an AI-based knowledge base to bring back the perfect answer.
Was that your experience recently?
That's reflecting on
The market.
the market and some of the questions and experiences that I had, and talking to a few friends about what they've experienced, and mine having done a load of, what is AI, and thinking about that and where that is, and had conversations with, some relatively senior people like in California and stuff, almost by accident. And that's the conclusion that you kind of have to come to. And I don't know whether that was a pre-existing trend before AI, but it's definitely exacerbated by what's going on. And some of the agents that I talked to at the beginning, they were like, I was like, I'm going on LinkedIn, but I'm consciously making the decision not to apply for jobs where I can see that I am not at least 90% fit for that role. Now, to do that, they've got to define the role, which a lot of people don't do. And he's like, that's exactly right. And that's when it opened up to me about, this is the challenge that we're having. The challenge that we're having is we're just getting this flood of applications, and we can't, so you're going into that process where your CV is just getting thrown into this bucket, and we're trying to use all of those tools that we've been using, and your CV may or may not come out at the end of it. So that's the first place that I used AI.
So if the jobs are written in a more vague manner to allow people to apply, then that 90% hit rate won't work as well, right? You can't look at a vaguer job description and say, I 90% hit that, because they're waiting for you to come in and ask you those open-ended questions to see whether or not you're
right.
fit.
So you can look at the job role or advertisement on LinkedIn, and you can say, from the level of detail that's in there, is this phishing, or is this further in the process and they're looking to recruit into a specific role? Okay. So if they give you a more detailed, this is the background of the company, this is the role skills that we're looking for, this is the culture of the organization, that is probably an end employer looking for a specific person. Okay. If you see a job spec that is, and now you can spot them very easily once you've looked at a few of them, that's been generated by AI. This is a generic product manager job description. All they're looking to do is get as many CVs as they can in as possible. And then they're doing their filtering on the basis of that. So, and the advice that I got at that stage was, you've got to remember that your CV, the only job that it has is to get you through. We have gone out, done that fishing exercise. We brought in 10,000 CVs, and what will get you through either the algorithm or the HR hiring manager, who knows nothing about what the job really is, and is reading your CV for keywords.
Mm.
And your CV just needs to get you through that. So I rebuilt my CV on the basis of, you are using AI in order to generate the idealized job spec for this role. Well, I can do that too.
Mm.
And now I can take my base document, which explains all of my experience to a high level of detail, everything I can think about, all of the jobs, and I can say to AI, based on the key skills required in order to be a senior product manager or product lead, take this CV, so extended, put everything in there because the AI is going to do the filtering for you, produce a 2-page CV covering my experience for the last 10 years, and we'll put that out. And then you can be reasonably confident that the same thing that generated the job spec is also then going to pick up on your CV and is going to tick lots of boxes on the.
So it's the AI
on the thing.
This is the AI, right?
You're using the AI to confirm that you've generated things that the AI will like. And that in LinkedIn there's that button, isn't it? Where you click where it's doing the AI assessment to see whether you're a good fit for the job.
Right.
Well, it's basically doing the same thing. It's just doing language analysis of what you've put out there versus the job spec, and saying, do these sequences of words have a matching context?
So this is how they're getting 200, 300 applications that are highly tailored to the job.
Because everybody's copped onto this now, and everyone's doing what I did, and everyone is submitting a CV that delivers at a very high hit rate.
So ironically, the AI is counterproductive in this case because it's over tailored on both sides.
And that's an issue with where AI is going to take us in the long run, or even in the medium term. Okay. And it's a good example of it, because you're going through that hiring process and you're having to, the hit rate is going up and up and up and up and up. Oh, whereas in the past, if you were like a 70% match to the job spec, you might get now you've got to get to 90-something% just to get the screening interview. Right. And then other stuff is happening at the screening interview, which is not part of the role that I got hired for in the end, but it's kind of useful to understand, because the role that I got hired for has been a human experience.
Right.
So a lot of things we can come back to, but let's go back to how things actually worked out. And I think in that first call where I had been open and like, I understand the role that you're trying to fill here. Here's the side, here's the perspective I can fill, here's the perspective I can't fill. That made their lives easier on that call. They went through the process. They still asked their questions, but it was a much more pleasant conversation.
You kind of build trust from the very start, right? Because you're kind of saying, oh, actually, I've not done that now, or I'm not coming from there. So if that's what you want,
that's not going to be me. And I think that's what led to the second interview,
right?
Where I'm we called on site so they can meet me in person, and there's 4 or 5 directors all with roles.
Yeah.
Going, okay, where does this guy fit? So then I went on site and I was like, okay. They all asked me different questions. The guy who had the role that I'd originally interviewed for, he gave me a very supportive, and everything, the questions that they asked, it was all, this is a friendly interview. It was still probing, and they were still looking for my questions, and lots of these kind of, like you say, open-ended questions where you have to bring your honest answer to it. But there could be multiple right answers here.
Right.
Okay, so then And I didn't prep on the culture of the organization. But if I was going into it again, I would have done.
What would the difference be?
So, in the example I was using before, where I was like, there's someone asked you, what if you were hiring a salesman, what would you be looking for? And there's two completely different answers. The correct answer would be the one that's tailored to the culture of the organization. And so if I was going into the kind of second interview or third interview now, or that kind of final interview, are we comfortable? Do we like this person? I would want to know much more about the culture, so that I knew that that I was comfortable working there, of course, but also two, that the answers that I gave to those open questions fit with the culture of the organization I'm looking to get hired by.
But also so I think it can be really, really nice, and I agree with you, to understand the culture, their mission, their vision, their values, all those sort of things. But also, what about you organically being a good fit for the culture, as opposed to trying to overly, like if you're organically good and that's perfect. Or, compared to, I'll fit into whatever mold you have for me.
Exactly. You kind of have to go and just be who you are. Then that could be painful.
But I think that's beautiful about what you've done in this instance. You've gone straight in, you've been direct, you've been honest, and you've kind of said, I'm not that guy, but I am this guy over here. And if that's what you want, let's have a real conversation. And then suddenly you go from one job interview to 5.
And I think by doing that, and it's more in the knowledge-based industry, is along, and we're going to talk a lot about AI here, but along comes the AI workforce. As I say, it's basically traditional education, rote learning, knowledge-based thing. So the jobs that it's going to erode are, if you're just, and here's the thing, if you're just taking content from ChatGPT and regurgitating it to someone, you're not adding any value at all, because they can do exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this conversation in a screening interview that I didn't get past, unsurprisingly, because what we explored was, you're using AI in order to generate exam questions or interview questions. That has to be based on knowledge that the AI has. Therefore, that knowledge has no value, because anyone can get it. It has.
Did you say this in the interview?
Well, yeah. I didn't say it has explicitly to this, but I was like, well, we've got to think about these things.
Okay.
And then we're like, yeah, we do. And interestingly, that organization was clearly going through that conversation itself, because they've recently, like in the last 2 months, so with it in no time at all, come out with new products that are addressing the existential threat to their organization, or about AI.
It's like the classic: if you put good stuff in, you get good stuff out. But if you put bad stuff in, you're going to get bad stuff out, like rubbish in, rubbish out, right?
And that's the process that those large language models have been going through. What's the difference between ChatGPT 3 and 4 and so on and so on? It's the editorial policies of what they've used to train the model, and the decisions that they've made in terms of how they classify that information. And the dream was that they would just increase the number of parameters by which they classified the information, so that you could make more and more granular questions and get appropriate answers out.
So if you use ChatGPT for decision making, you're using someone else's logic for making those decisions compared to your own logic, which might be based on your own values or guiding principles in the organization.
A lot of people will say, if you use ChatGPT to make decisions, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Because you're literally saying, here's a string of words. Now, I'm going to hand that to you. You're going to decide how you're going to classify that. So what I meant by that. And then you're going to go away and you're going to just attempt to match some other words. and then you're going to give me that back.
Hmm.
And what people quickly discovered was the whole hallucination thing, which was if I give you that prompt, you can go away and you might find 5 matches.
Right. Totally irrelevant or relevant.
Right. So they were hoping, okay, we'll go to a billion different ways of classifying that sentence, and that'll enable us to get a more refined answer and only get one, remove the hallucinations. And they've moved past that now. And what you're getting into this is that kind of what's called RAG or whatever, where they're using kind of search of the internet to validate the answers that the large language model has given and then try and pick the correct one.
It still doesn't take into account the context, I guess, right?
That kind of classification that they've come up with,
Yeah.
that kind of parameterization of that string of words, so a sentence or whatever that would be. And it can be applied to lots of different things other than language, which is a big thing that some of the guys are raising. They're saying, well, we instead of having a large language model, we can have a large protein model that says this is the string of proteins that represents these things, and we can get it to learn. You can ask it a question, and it'll come back and tell you what protein satisfies that question.
Okay.
So it's just, this is a sequence of things, and here's the context in which we think that sequence applies. So if you talk about language, we've looked at this, and in the context of how we learned it or absorbed it into the model, we decided that someone was angry when they did this, or this sentence reads like someone is angry.
Yeah.
So someone has had to make that value judgment of that sentence and then decide angry, and they've got a parameter emotional.
Yes,
Okay?
there's a lot of presuppositions in there. That's angry, that's happy, that's worried, that's concerned.
Right. So when you're then giving it the prompt, that's why you have to say, you are what role you're doing, and give me and you are happy or chatty or angry or whatever, and you have to prompt it with all of those parameters. So it's starting to narrow down the range of responses that it will give you back based on all of these parameters.
Does that make the prompts even more important?
Yeah, because you're not, if you just kind of send an open-ended question into this big thing, it's just going to go, that one?
Yeah, here's a random answer I think might fit based on a small amount of information you've given me.
So then in how do you engineer a good prompt? And by the way, one of the great things that you can do is you can give AI a prompt and you can ask it to re-engineer that prompt and give you a better one back.
Okay, very good.
So that's a useful
prompt you
one.
To give you a prompt.
Yeah, and there's an example on there on the OpenAI site of here's how to do that meta prompting, as they call it.
Okay.
Right. So that's part of what they've been doing. It's like, you give me a prompt, then we're going to do X rounds of meta prompting, and then we're going to go out to the internet and search for some extra information and add that into the prompt. So they're attempting to do that narrowing for you.
Okay.
But if they weren't, then you would have to be, and this person, this is the role I want you to provide. This is perform. This is the style of language that I want you to use. This is the thing. And all this.
Or what about asking the AI to ask you a series of questions to allow it to?
That's what so if you go and do the meta prompt, that's what it will give you back.
That's what it'll give you.
It'll say, here's a list of questions that you can answer. And that's where that's that whole kind of chain of thought, and where they're trying to get to with these later models with reasoning. But to come back to what you were saying before, to get it to reason, what they're doing is they are rote teaching it reasoning processes. And then you ask it which of those rote learned reasoning processes should be used in this situation, and then it's using that rote learned reasoning process to go away and do some further regurgitation of rote learning, right? And I called it a traditional education because that's effectively what traditional education was invented for. It was invented for kind of Western civilization to go out to India or Africa, wherever they were trying to conquer and
Conquer and
control.
colonize at the time.
And they needed lots of people to do that. It's not like they could just educate their elite on how to run the country,
Right.
how to run the finances of the country and do politics, so which was that kind of top level education. If you think of that, they teach philosophy and they teach, economics. That's no longer enough. Now you need a whole load of administrators to go out to all these places in the world, but you don't want to teach them to think. What you want to teach them is, here's a bunch of things that we want you to do, and we want you to understand the context that you're in and apply that thing.
And regurgitate exactly what we've told you to regurgitate. So it's more like being programmed and then you just deliver that program.
So, an education where the teacher stands up at the board and teaches you the thing, and you go into an exam and you regurgitate that thing based on the question. That's what we're talking about here. And large language models and that version of AI aces that.
Yeah.
Apart from the hallucination thing.
Kind of makes you think, do we really need that rote learning education anymore? Because we're at the very start of AI and it's already taking most of that over.
So luckily, we've already been on that journey as a society, a Western society, for at least the last 30 years. And there's been that move of the kind of primary and secondary education system towards critical thinking. Because people have been, there's the internet. I can go to Wikipedia. I can all the information I need is in Wikipedia and I can go and learn it.
Really? Do you think we're going towards critical thinking in education?
I think there's definitely been, within certain areas of education, there certainly is, or one might be called the more progressive side of it. But then there's there's always that counteraction of, people who are like older. It's like, all of a sudden you're developing all my skills and how I know and who I am and kind of, the whole kind of middle management thing where I just have the bosses coming to me with a problem. I need to be able to identify what problems my C-level suite are having, and then I need to go and find solutions for them.
Yeah.
Right? I just need to go to whoever I can get the tools from, whether that's a master's degree or whatever. And then I need to be able to regurgitate and reapply that learned, verified method and address that problem.
Right.
Well, potentially all of that is gone.
Yeah.
Maybe not now, but that's the journey that we're on right now.
Feels like very soon.
Well, everybody at that level is now using AI to find, okay, what's the method that I need to use here? Here's my problem, ChatGPT. Tell me about the method that I'll go and apply it. And the danger there is, and it goes back to can I use AI to solve my problems? That's a misunderstanding of what AI is. It cannot make any value judgment. It doesn't do any critical thinking. It's just a probability model. It's a knowledge base.
Mm.
And if you go and you ask it to make a decision for you, it cannot make that decision for you.
I've heard it described as like it being able to answer closed-ended questions as opposed to open-ended questions. Like closed-ended, there's an answer, can you go and find it, compared to the open-ended question. Like maybe we're not really sure what the question is or what it should be. We're not really sure what the problem is, and we need to figure this out. Like that's the kind of value judgment. Do you think that's a good assessment, or would you rephrase that in a different way?
It's a little bit more dangerous than that. If you ask it the open-ended question, it will look at the open-ended question and it'll go, I've got this billion parameters and I classify that question as orange, apples, 74. And that could be the same way that it classifies the closed question. And then it'll go out with that, okay, that's my understanding of the context here. What words would someone reply to in that context, and that's what it will give you back. So it will confidently say, here is the answer to your open question. But you're not going to be able to know unless you really think about what knowledge went into that model, what value did the people who put that model information into that, and how did they decide that they were going to classify that information.
Yeah. That's scary. I found that a few times that I put in information and I get the wrong answer out, and I happen to figure out that it's the wrong answer, but it's very confidently giving me the wrong answer until you correct it, and then it's like, oh yeah,
right, which is you basically answering or correcting some of the classification that it's given to the different parameters,
right,
so that it has a better probabilistic chance of giving you a more appropriate answer back.
Yeah.
But if you're unquestionably just taking what it gives to you, you can make some very, very grave errors, you might say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's why there's, certainly through the autumn, there's been much more of a focus on narrower and smaller models that are trained for specific purposes with specific knowledge and with better provenance. And that's one of the discussions or challenges that I've had to some of the guys in California. It's like they're all going, well, no, the European Union is going to kill itself with the regulatory thing. And I'm like, if you object to the regulations that the European Union is bringing forward at this point, which are basically around the provenance of the information that's going into the language model. So, where did it get that answer from? Well, it got it from here.
Yeah.
Right. If you're stating that that's a problem for you in terms of training your AI, what you're basically saying is that you're training your AI unethically, in that you are quite happy to go out and gather up information that you are not happy to justify that you had access to.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're saying. We can't justify. Well, we had to justify that we had access to all this information. Why? Copyright.
Copyright, validity,
accuracy,
and
all that kind of
all
stuff.
that sort of important stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, if you're not prepared to do that, that's casting more of a question over you than it is at this point over the regulation that the European Union is bringing in. And for me personally, my view of OpenAI at this point is that they have displayed sufficient unethical behavior in how they have trained their models. And then you could ask the question of any of these large models, because they require so much data in order to get to build the model to the billion parameters, to that level of that. In theory, they have consumed all of human available knowledge at this point in order to train the model to 91 or whatever it is % accuracy. If they are objecting to this kind of, oh yeah, you've just got to be able to prove where you got the stuff from, if they're objecting to that, and they're saying we need this much data, that we've run out of data, and that we need more data, and if we don't get access to it, we'll never get to general intelligence, they're basically saying we're going to trample over all property rights in order to gather up as much information as we can and just throw this thing into here. So now your question when you're using ChatGPT is, given that me personally, that's my view of the process that they've gone through, and if they can't prove what the provenance of that text that they've just given me back through this matching process, I'm at risk, because I don't know whether that is copyrighted material or not.
What about putting a prompt in?
What is this?
Is this copyrighted material?
I guess.
Well, I don't know if they just give you a generic answer to
Did it
work around that.
Did it really give me a real answer?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So tons of ethical kind of issues around the provenance of the data that they're collecting and whether or not they're going to adhere to EU regulations.
It's more the kind of, these are the judgments as users of these things that we're going to have to make. We're going to have to think critically, not only about, oh, this is a great tool and it gave me this answer really quickly, and That's speeded up my process. But if you're not thinking critically about where that company got their information from, how it's going through the process, how it's categorized that data in order to give me these answers, what value judgments did they make? And then you're into the whole question of what is their culture? What are their ethics? How would they view this data in order to do that training and categorization before it became that usable thing at the end of it, right?
Yeah.
And if this is the average answer, or deemed to be the average correct answer, is there a better correct answer for my niche question?
Yeah. That's a interesting perspective. I was at the web conference and I heard one of the speakers talking about that if you're asking it a question, or if you're asking it to create something, it will often revert to the mean. It will go to the
Right.
average. It will give you the bland answer, as opposed to maybe what we like, especially if we're enjoying like anything that's fictional or anything that's like, just for entertainment. We want to get something that's probably an extreme, or probably, something that's really quite unusual. That's really getting our attention, but it's going to revert to kind of a blander answer.
And one of the exercises that I did to test this was, and I it's still running at the moment, I'd set up a workflow, and it goes to the Irish Times and RTE homepages, and it scrapes the news articles, and then it feeds that into AI with a number of different prompts and different engines, and it says, tell me 4 jokes and a punchline, and combine that into a single thing. So, and then on the back of that, tell me the joke, give me a script for generating a YouTube short on the back of it, and then give me generate the prompts required in order to generate the images to generate that YouTube short.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
And the prompts that you used were things like, you are a North Dublin comedian. Give me that. And then in some of the prompts, I would name specific comedians.
Okay. In the style of
Dylan Whatever. Yeah. And then use it on a range of different models and see what it comes back with. And you could tell by doing that certain models have been trained with the jokes told by those comedians, and some of them haven't. Because the ones that have been classified in a way that enabled them to identify the comedian that I was talking about came back with jokes very much in the style of that comedian.
Right.
And the ones that hadn't gave me kind of more generic quotes. And some of them have been given, the text, the content had been classified sufficiently that they could identify what a vernacular North Dublin response would be.
Right.
Sounded like they came from RT.
Yeah.
And with the same prompt, some of the other models hadn't. So that's why I'm saying, the response that you're going to get back is highly dependent on how they've decided to classify the content and the decisions that they've made around the material that they're classifying.
But the joke is a really interesting way of doing it, because you're asking it to firstly find good references from the actual comedians, make it relevant to current day events, but also entertaining. And that's why that's particularly difficult to write the jokes.
Unless someone has in advance gone in and parameterized that to say whether it's entertaining or not.
Like they've made a formula for what a joke is or what entertaining is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or they've said, we got that from a source that is deemed to be entertaining.
Mm.
Therefore, this response, as a result of coming from that source, we are classifying that as an entertaining response.
Right.
So then when you ask it for an entertaining response, it's filtering down.
Right.
But you by kind of getting so specific in my request to it, it was clearly getting to a point where it didn't have enough source data to have trained the model properly, and I started getting nonsense back.
Okay.
Yeah, because large language model just needs massive things. So if I'm asking for a joke based on and it Tommy Tiernan or something like that, yeah, it doesn't have enough source material to have built the model accurately.
Okay, so it can't properly echo the sort of joke you would make
in that scenario.
Did any of the jokes make you laugh?
Yes, because I engineered the prompt in the way that would generate kind of whimsical, pseudo-intellectual fancy. So I kind of programmed it to generate jokes that I found funny.
You would like.
But, when I showed that to my partner, she didn't find them funny.
Right. Okay.
Right.
So you could tailor to your particular sense of
But
humor.
I'm pretty sure that I could have rewritten the prompts in a way that she would have found entertaining, for sure.
All of the prompts I put in for jokes, Christmas Day jokes, they just come back with plays on words, just real standard sort of jokes that they can just punch out hundreds and thousands of, I'm sure.
Yeah, but when you ask it to generate puns, it's not very good at.
Oh, really?
It's not that good at punning.
That's a little bit more complex.
It is.
So maybe it struggles with that.
Yeah, which is interesting, because one of the things that it is very good at is it's got all of that language processing in it. So all the applications that I've seen used where it's been successful, and the ones that I use myself, like the one that we're talking about earlier, where it's, here's the CV, here's the job description, match the content in the CV to the content in the job description and give me the covering letter.
Right.
It's really just in language processing on information that you're giving it.
Yeah. Quick closed-ended, right?
Right, rather than having to come up with any information itself. And that's the safest space in which to use AI right now.
Yeah.
No, AI, we're talking about large language models.
Do you think we all need to be learning how to use these models properly? Or is that like a 3-month endeavor, or is it more you need like 10 guiding principles to help you use AI effectively?
I think there's some basic principles. First question, do we all need to be doing this? Absolutely, we do, because we'll come back to the job market thing. If you're doing this in the job market, you're up against other people who are all doing this right now. And the number is only going up and up and up. When 3 months ago, job application, and I would see it go to 100 applicants within 2 days. Now we're seeing it go to 1,000 applicants within 2 hours.
Oh my God.
Right. So that's the level. It's kind of, we may not want to, we may have ethical questions about whether this is a good thing or not, but the reality is everybody is doing it right now because it's cheap enough to do it. And so you kind of have to.
Yeah, you have to go with the innovation.
Well, and it comes back to the verifiable answer question that you have when you're with middle management, and we kind of spoke briefly about whether we want to talk about neurodivergence or not. But one thing that I have found is if you are someone who comes with novel and creative answers to problems, quite often that novel and creative answer will be turned down because it's not verifiable. Someone can't, if we go, right, we've got this process challenge, or like we're doing Scrum, but there's something that we want to do. If I just come back and say, well, maybe we do it like this, versus someone that comes back and says, I've been out and the standard answer that I found from these sources is that we should do this. Well, that answer is verifiable against trusted sources, whereas mine's only verifiable against me.
And your years of experience and...
Right, but it still is only one individual. So the tendency of a well-established organization will be always to trust the verifiable source, or the resource that I, as a middle manager, can then go to myself, and then I can learn without having to talk.
Right.
and
This is
be
like
reliant on this other individual.
this is a low risk tolerance for those creative or innovative ideas or
It
approaches.
depends on what stage the organization is in.
Yeah.
So when you're in that kind of startup or growth stage, there's more space for experimentation. You're looking for those novel answers that will enable you to outperform the average. Okay. But, the funding is going in. All the focus is on the top line. How do we grow the top line? There's not as much focus on the bottom line. As that organization or product, if you like, grows to the point that it's clearly established, clean market fit and sufficient market size, particularly if it's moving to a position where you're moving towards some level of market dominance, whether that's one of the 4 or 5 key providers in that market, then the organization naturally needs to shift from that, from we're just trying to grow and people are funding it on the expectation that it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and we're doing our product development, and we're at some point the investors are going to turn and say, now we want the return on investment. Right? So now it's not about innovation and creativity, it's about what's my revenue to cost ratio.
Right.
Okay. And then at that point, your appetite for risk completely changes. And that's why you see organizations go through a big shift in the people that they employ, or even the people who are on the board and at C-level, because the mindset that you need at that point completely changes from aggressive, sales-led,
risk-taking,
risk-taking, experimental, to, okay, we've answered the questions. Now we've got to strip the costs out, generate as much profit we can, and get through the tail of this and keep it alive for as long as you can. Now, these things go in cycles and all of that kind of stuff, but broadly, everyone draws the bell curve of the product cycle. Once you hit the top of the bell curve, you actually need to change the mindset of the people that you have in the organization from people who are willing to take risk or excited by risk to people who are risk averse. And that's why as that organization gets bigger and you get multiple levels within that organization, and people are looking not at how do I grow the product and how am I engaged, but how do I establish myself in this large organization.
So it becomes more political at that stage.
It naturally becomes more risk averse.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, and I think that's one of the things that AI is going to challenge us on, is that if you're going to use AI, it can only use documented input.
Yeah.
You have to have written it down. You have to have written your decisions down. You have to have written your meetings down. There's no, and that's all black and white. It's all written down. It's all gone into the model, and then you're asking the model to kind of give you answers back. At the moment, there's that wide kind of, we're having that conversation, nothing's written down, we are making decisions based on inference, rather than me directly saying anything to you. You're picking up on what I meant, and you're going in, you're doing something. And fundamentally, that mechanism enables me to deny that that's what I meant in the first place. Right? But AI doesn't allow that anymore. Because to get AI to work, you've got to give it that written.
You got to be super specific,
Right,
and lock in the parameters all around.
And it can only take input that's recorded. Right. So now all that inference and non-verbal communication and all that kind of stuff, that can't be used to drive AI right now.
Do you think there's an advantage for people who prefer that style of communication? People who prefer the binary style of communication? Maybe they're more neurodivergent by.
I don't know, because there's people are reacting to this in different ways. Okay, people who have strong non-verbal emotional intelligence skills are also all saying, "Oh, AI is coming along and it's really good at all that stuff. Therefore, we need to put a really high value on the stuff that's left, the stuff that I'm really good at."
Yeah, of course.
And then other people might be coming along and saying, "Well, all of that non-verbal communication and influence, that can't be used to drive the thing that's giving us this massive productivity gain. So that's got no value. But what we'll have to do, there will have to be a big mindset and acceptance that in this game, I can pretend that I'm the 98% guy. That's not what I meant. You went and did that. That's not what I meant. Right? I'm still Peter Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, now I can't. And there's going to have to be an acceptance that actually all those people, or everybody really, I'm not trying to single anybody out here, C-suite looking at people, and you really have that expectation that they were not making 98% decisions, and through all these non-verbal, company politics, blah, 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 coffee machine conversations, whatever we want to call them, everyone could pretend that they were 98% people. Now they can't pretend that they're 98% people.
Yeah, so there's less places to hide, or there's nowhere to hide.
Right, and you're seeing that in the hiring process at the moment, in that, like what I say, you've got to be a 98% match to even make the screening interview. So what pressure is that putting on all the people who aren't a 98%, who don't have the experience to be a 98% match? How are they even making it to the screening interview?
Yeah.
They're using AI in order to fake the application.
And then the recruiters or the hiring managers are getting 10 times more applications than they would have before. And so what happens then? Do they have to do a human screen eventually, or do they just keep plugging it back into AI until they narrow it down? And then at what point is the specific keywords not as useful as sitting down and talking to the person? Do you know what I mean?
And that's where there's a couple of recruiters that I have conversations with who are clearly thinking about these challenges. And it would be interesting for you to get them in, and you have that conversation about how they're trying to deal with this challenge.
Because at some point, then you just got 10x the amount of applicants, and now you still need to figure out, okay, well, I need to put in either an additional parameter into my AI, or I need to figure out if soft skills are going to give an additional advantage in this role.
Right?
Is it a people facing role in any way?
Yeah, and that's one of, I forgot who it was on News Talk a couple of days ago, and they were like, what's going to be the big trend in AI for 2025? And they're like, well, I think we're going to see more use of it in customer service. And I'm like, no, we're not. No, we're not, because
people don't like AI in customer service. They don't like.
Well, you're not going to be able to tell the difference.
Oh, okay.
In theory, you're not going to be able to tell the difference, other than it's clearly not clued into what you're saying to it.
Fair.
And I had that experience with some of the interviews that I had with people trying to use AI. We're off on another divergence now.
Yeah.
Where were we going there?
So, but I wanted to circle back and ask you about, you came into the interview and he had plucked some questions from AI, and you were then saying, I'm not sure if that's the best way to do it. Is that right?
Oh, so I had one screening interview with an AI.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It seemed to like all the answers that I gave it. But then it broke down. And then I got another email to say that I needed to do this. And I'm like, and at that point, I tried to get hold of a human. It's like, I think I've just done this.
Okay.
Was it that I didn't give the answers that the AI was looking for? And that's why you're asking me to do this again? Or is there a mistake in your process? And that's just the error. So at this point, to me, that's a massive red flag. Anyone who gives you a screening interview where they ask you to screen with AI, they clearly don't fully understand AI at the moment.
Yeah.
Or just jumping back to the News Talk thing, why I don't think it's going to come in customer service, and why I've seen other people who don't think it is because it's not verified. The outcome is not verifiable.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's two use cases for AI adoption at the moment. One where you can verify the outcome, human in the loop as they're calling it, or you have some other way of verifying the outcome before it's used. And then the second is scenarios where you're mass market and 91% is good enough. You don't mind that it might generate 15% churn, or you don't mind that of the total number of candidates that are out there, you might miss your ideal candidate because there's enough of your ideal candidate in the remaining 80% that you're going to find a good hire.
So it might be suitable for maybe lower level roles, entry level roles, more generic roles compared to higher level, more specific niche roles.
Yeah. And then the other way that people are going back is that, like, they're either, we're just trying to hire through references, which is loaded in it itself. I suppose it's is it hiring by net promoter score? Maybe. Are you prepared to stake your personal reputation on recommending this person?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people will say no, even though that might be a good candidate.
Yeah.
So where have we gone there? So can I verify the outcome, or is it a mass thing where I don't mind the fact that this is based on probability and it's only 80% accurate?
Yeah, it's difficult in that circumstance, I think, because humans, we both have the analog way of communicating and the direct way of communicating. You know, if we're cold in the room, we could say, I'm cold, can we close the window? Or we could say, is it a bit breezy in here? And then infer that the window gets closed by someone, right? So I think that sort of thing is very tricky. You know, you've got this analog indirect communication we use a lot of time, maybe particularly in Ireland. I don't know if it's the same, you know, in other countries, but I think that's going to be tricky for the AI to pick up on. It
depends on how was there a parameter created in the model for that indirect meaning, and did someone identify what that indirect meaning and classify that question with that indirect meaning at that point?
But you also have to hope that the person knows exactly what their problem is specifically, whereas sometimes we don't always know, right?
And then someone's having to apply that what's their culture, what's their understanding of that question. To the Irish example, there's a whole bunch of questions that people ask in Ireland that kind of have specific cultural meaning.
Do you want a cup of tea? Right?
Yeah.
What's it mean?
How are you feeling? It's an invitation to not an invitation to whether you actually want a cup of tea or not. It's like an invitation to find out how you're feeling.
Yeah, exactly. Is it, or it's an invitation to stay and to chat, or it could just be a politeness, maybe. And it could just be a rote politeness kind of question, right?
Yeah. Well, the other class one is how are you?
How are you? Yeah. Very confusing for foreigners coming over.
Right, and then there's so many multiple layers to that in Ireland, and a lot of coming to the cultural thing, and then how do you train a language model so that it gives you appropriate answers in that culture? A lot of people kind of try to tell people from overseas that are coming to Ireland, and that's the same question in the north of England as well. They're kind of told, that they're asking you, but they're not really. It's just a thing that they say you're free to ignore it.
It's a greeting.
That's like level one. It's like you're okay. If you just ignore it, or you can assume that you can ignore it, then you'll get along all right in Irish society. Yeah. But actually, it is level 2 and level 3 and level 4 it is actually a genuine conversation, and you can ignore it.
Yeah.
And by ignoring, you're saying to that other person, everything's fine.
Yeah.
There's nothing really to talk about.
Yeah.
But if you actually do open up to that person and make that more empathetic connection, like as not in Irish society, someone will stop what they're doing and then like really probe into what's going on. You're okay.
You'll get the therapist treatment, right?
Kind of thing.
The counselor.
You know what I mean? Be careful who you do. You might get like bombarded with 1,000 questions, and
you have to consider whether or not you really wanted to go into that story or not, right?
Yeah. Do I really want to tell you how June is feeling?
Yeah.
Whether her operation went okay, and
Yeah, exactly.
That's where that gatekeeping question can hide within the Irish culture.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? So there's a lot of nuance for the AI to eventually pick through to understand exactly what we mean, or
And then with large language models, the question is there enough base material for it to be trained at to generate the accuracy required at that level of nuance? And that is where people are saying, the latest models coming out from OpenAI are not better. They're trying to be more refined in what they train it. It's like, how did they get from grade school or elementary to grade school to up to doctorate level? Well, they just chose different material to train it on.
Yeah.
And they were more choosy about what they trained it on.
Yeah.
There is a startup in Ireland that is working on these kind of challenges that doesn't use a language model, doesn't require as much data to train it on, and it generates a deterministic answer. So one thing that you'll notice if you're prompting AI, one of these large language models, you'll prompt it one day and you'll get a good joke, and then you'll prompt it another day and you get gobbledygook. And whether that's they're retraining the model or whether it's just how the overall system works, it's not giving you back a consistent answer.
Right.
So there's a whole range of existing problems that IT is used for, and it's used because it gives you back a consistent answer, a level of consistency way above what humans can reach. And that's why I have a kind of question around the guy from Microsoft over Christmas coming, software as a service is dead. Everything's going to be replaced by AI agents. And I'm like, no, because there's a huge amount of value in what IT is currently used for that is all about it delivering a consistent response.
Right.
And so for me, that's one of the big questions for anyone who's looking at AI adoption. It's, am I looking for a deterministic response? Am I looking for the same response every time for this set of input parameters? Or am I looking for something that's probably the response? And if you're looking for something that's probably the response, then yeah, okay, that's the new problem space that AI is going to help us with. These problems were so complicated to understand that we couldn't give it to something trying to do that functional, you give me these input parameters and I always do this as a result. Now we've got these tools that can help us come up with an answer that's probably right. Provided we understand that what we're getting, an answer that is probably right rather than an answer that is definitely right. If you need that deterministic answer, then what we're going to do is we're going to use AI to generate the workflow or process or code to do the deterministic thing. And it may be that enables us to develop code, solutions that have more complex inputs than we can currently, because the AI gets better at generating code than humans do at the moment.
Do you see AI as taking over the IT function? I mean, like,
this is the number one place that everybody's looking.
Like it's going to take some of the lower level jobs. Instead of having the team, you're going to have just the product manager who's just using AI and doing everything that way.
I'll forget about the product manager as well.
Forget about the product manager.
Well, it's like an iceberg. Okay, so the history of AI is all about going from the bytecode that can be run on a processor, and then we've moved our way to higher levels of abstraction. Okay, and then we hit a point where we've got these kind of what we call high level languages like Python and JavaScript. But you still need developers to do that translation from what you're trying to tell them that you want through your iterative agile process, and then how they think about that problem, the intellectual limitations that they have in terms of how many inputs does this problem have and how can I encode that in this high level thing, and then everything below the water goes compilers through all of that kind of stuff. And what we're doing with AI is we're now moving that level of abstraction up a little bit. So there's more stuff under the water.
Yeah.
So the part of the iceberg that I can address, that humans need to address, it is just increasingly just the top bit of the iceberg.
Your developers or your IT team are really becoming critical thinkers who are able to use AI to program, to write code, to all that other stuff.
So the traditional way of thinking about waterfall process was you spent a third of your time defining what you wanted, a third of your time doing the development work, and a third of your time testing it. Okay. And really, I'm going to add 5 sections. So a bit at the beginning and a bit at the end. So a bit of it defining what your problem is, or understanding what problem you have, then defining what that is, then doing the development, then confirming that the development gave you the answer that you were actually looking for. And then you've got to then implement that and roll that out into your customers or into your own production environment. Yeah. AI, what they're certainly focused on right now is the code generation part. I have a clear set of acceptance criteria. Give me a working application. Let's say we collapse that to 0 or near 0. Right? Don't need developers anymore. Okay. But also at the same time, from that acceptance criteria, I'm going to get it to define the automated acceptance testing. My testing thing just came down to 0. And that's what people are trying to do with the continuous delivery anyway. It's like we use automated testing,
right,
so that we shrink that part of the process, so that once someone has developed it, we can just run all that automated testing and put it into production
and
straight
take
away.
out that step.
Yeah. And you can look at it, and then we're okay, well, now we've brought the development cycle to 0 and the test cycle to 0. And then as part of that I'm also going to get it to generate the user manual. I'm going to get it to generate the script that I can use for video content for the training. I'm going to get it to do the script for train the trainer material. So I'm going to tick off that human communication trainer to user. And I'm going to hit all of those different learning models in the adoption material that I'm generating. Okay. So now my go-to-market, because I was going to generate all my marketing material, right? My go-to-market just came down. So I've taken those 5, everything from defining the acceptance criteria, and I brought that down to, let's say, a week.
Right.
So now I can iterate my product that quickly. Literally, you can tell me what you want, and I will give you the application, the verification that the application does what you asked me to, all the adoption material immediately. Right. So now you're saying, oh, well, the product manager is still safe. And everyone is going, oh, I need to be a product manager. And go, what's this product management thing? The easiest way to do product management is to go, what are the top 5 companies delivering services in this problem space? And there are very few novel problem spaces out there. There are going to be problem spaces that we couldn't tackle before that now we can tackle. But largely the most valuable problems are all solved in some way. How do I communicate with you?
Yeah.
Well, it used to be that we had to be face to face. Then along came the telephone, the mail. Then came the telephone, and then we've ended up
with emails and instant
chats.
Well,
emails, and then we got to instant chat. So in a lot of ways, all those kind of primary problem spaces are understood. And what society has done is, as we get new technology, we look at how we can apply that technology to those known problem spaces and see whether there is a more efficient way of answering that problem. Right? So given that all those problem spaces are broadly out there and there's somebody trying to solve them, you can go and you can use AI and you can say, go and scrape those top 6 companies, tell me all the features that their product has, generate acceptance criteria for those features.
So I have a question, right? So if you have this very refined, advanced process where you can use AI to do all the donkey work and do the testing and, put together training materials and marketing and so on. And don't you also risk having this convergence of the technology and of the products to all become very, very similar? The same way as once Apple released the first iPhone, that everyone else has a rush to get a very similar looking smartphone
Correct.
to the market. You've got this convergence that comes and it
Spot on.
becomes a little bit blander maybe. And so you're at home doing your product and I'm at home doing my product and we're both using AI and we both just taken IT teams totally out of the question and companies out of the question and accounting and all that sort of stuff. But our products are essentially the same because we've used AI compared to using human creativity.
And smartphone is a good example of that. When Apple came out with the iPhone, and they designed it in such a way, because they had some previous thinking that they were hung up on, but also it's to do with the limitations of the mobile networks in the US, which were less advanced than the ones in Europe. That led the European manufacturers to think about devices that were always connected, whereas in the US, Apple knew that devices were not connected, like 60, 70, 80% of the time. So that they thought more about how do we have a device that has apps on it that can work off, because apps can work offline. Whereas these other solutions that like Nokia or whoever put forward were like, oh no, we think people will be on, network available 80% of the time, and we'll build solutions on that basis. So you get a whole kind of range of people trying to find this is new technology, here's these range of things, and then the market decides, and here we are, however many years later, and you can't tell not only the difference between any of the smartphones, but you open your browser and it looks like a smartphone, and you open your satellite navigation and it looks like a thing, and
everything looks like an app dashboard.
It's like this is the established answer in our culture at this time, and certainly where I've come from, when I was like, how do we design the first screen, the landing screen for this platform? It's like, people are coming to this, they have an expectation. There's a cultural expectation of what that's going to look like. It needs to look like a set of icons that takes them to the various parts of this app.
So it's convenient in terms of developing a UX or a UI to know that we all expect to have a set of icons that looks like a dashboard that we're familiar with. But in terms of like innovation, do you think there's any risk or worries that everything just becomes bland, everything becomes the same? Like if you got AI to create a series of songs or jokes, you might get loads of...
So you can look at it 2 ways. One is that way. The other way of looking at it is that any problem will collapse to the correct answer much quicker. And the value of innovation potentially disappears, because what I described to you earlier is the day that you launch your feature on a software platform, and this is why I think people are saying software as a service is dead. The day that you launch it, I can scrape it, I can build it, I can launch it, and I can be marketing, So the opportunity to great differentiation is kind of gone. So then if the solutions aren't going to be particularly unique, where's the value that I'm going to deliver? And that's why I've been saying that I think and you're seeing this already, but how people market their product and how people make buying decisions about their product is going to become purely tribal, purely cultural.
I think you see that in America much more than Europe already, right? You've got iPhone users and you've got non-iPhone users, you've got...
Yeah, or Figma versus Adobe, or...
people pick teams a lot, really, really strongly in the US, I think.
Well, Monster versus Leinster, right?
Well, also, also now we've all got teams. I think a little bit less tribal than the US. Our politics is less tribal, but still, it's there too, for sure.
I came to Ireland in 2005. I found it there is a more uniform culture, but it is quite tribal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe you're seeing it from a different perspective, right?
Yeah. So it's more like what's left. If the solutions and all the products are the same, what's left? The only thing that is left is, are we in the same tribe? Are you buying this because you're of my tribe?
Do you believe in it or not? So it goes back to this really deep human emotion of tribalism.
Yeah, or kind of, you've seen this in politics enormously, as kind of the more AI and automation, because politics is a great one where 65% accurate answer is going to move the dial sufficiently for you to be elected president.
Yeah.
Right. And we're already way beyond that in terms of the level of the accuracy. Not enough that I can rely on a customer service in a one-to-one relation communication where I need it to be right. Yeah. 91% or 95% in a customer service situation isn't accurate enough.
Yeah.
That it's not good, because 4% of the time it's going to be completely wrong. It's going to cause reputational damage.
Oh, right. Okay.
That has that 6, 10, 15 times amplifier versus good news. The whole net promoter score calculation is built around that sufficient inaccuracy on top of inaccuracy on top of inaccuracy on top of inaccuracy. Then I've delivered such a poor experience that it's going to materially impact the value of my proposition to my customers.
Wow.
Okay, so that's why I don't think there's going to be a rush to adopt AI in customer service, or where there are attempts to do it that they're going to fail. Yeah, because and part of that is the point that I read from one of the leading guys in California is like the reason that this isn't going to work is that the outcome isn't verifiable or easily verifiable. And AI is going to be adopted in the spaces that the outcome is verifiable. And the main thing, the reason for that is that enables you to iteratively improve the quality of the AI.
When you're explaining these things to internal stakeholders, and when you go forward and you continue to explain them, because it sounds like you've got your finger on the pulse of AI, probably a lot more than many people. What sort of feedback are you experiencing? Is it, this is really interesting, Rick, keep telling us more, or is it, we don't see it that way, or is it kind of a mixed bag?
I don't know. I think everybody's just struggling to grasp it.
Yeah.
And part of what I've been doing for the last 3 months is just be making contact with people. Show me what you're doing.
Yeah.
Show me what you're doing. And interestingly, I went to Manchester to a wedding not so long ago, and all the people there were in a different industry. And I was talking about this stuff and the conversations that are going on within the IT industry about all the stuff that I'm talking about here. And they're like, holy, we're in this, our industry is all going to be materially impacted in this. And we're not part of the conversation.
Yeah. Like the legal profession is going to be really disrupted, I think, as an example.
Yeah. They can get on top of the hallucination, but it's definitely one of the areas that they've looked to tackle. Basically, they've gone, where's the high value knowledge work?
Yeah.
Not intelligence, where's the high value knowledge work? That's slightly different questions.
Yeah.
So in the legal profession, it might be, here's my case, what laws apply?
Yeah. And now you can run it after that.
And now I've got some critical thinking to do about what it's said. And then I might even ask it, okay, how do I generate me a coherent argument around the set of laws and the kind of thing? And it appears to be that's where the people who are developing AI are targeting it at the moment. So go back to my recruiting journey. In preparation for going into the interview with the 5 directors, I went to one of the research AIs, U.com, use the researcher function. And I used Code as well. And I said, based on their LinkedIn profiles, go and learn about the roles that each of these individuals has been hiring and what skills they've been hiring for. Then match the skills that they've been hiring for to the job description. So which of the skills required for this job are these people interested in? And then I asked it, what questions could I expect from those individuals? And based on my experience, what answers could I give?
How did you find those responses?
It was really good at that.
Was it?
Because it's not really adding in any additional knowledge. I'm not relying on it to give me, to regurgitate knowledge from the knowledge base. I was giving it the factual information that I wanted it to process, and it was using its language processing ability to do the matching. And that
did you give it, let's say if you're given an interview answer, did you still have to give it extra background information that's not on your CV because you have to flesh out a story?
It gave me enough of an indication of the kind of questions each of those individuals that were going to ask, and it was reasonably accurate at that.
Okay.
And then it gave me enough of here's the parts of your experience that line up with that.
And you should expand on that.
That gave me my knowledge base going into that interview. That during that process, I shared the things that I knew and had used the II to tell me that they would be interested in as individuals.
Very good.
Before they asked the question.
And how did you find it? Accurate, reasonably accurate?
Well, it comes back to the human in the loop. It was information and processing. You know, for me to have done that, imagine me like manually trying to go to those LinkedIn profiles. Well, what skills does this person would have come up with a whole load of skills that were not relevant to the role, and I would have like cognitively been trying to filter those down. Then I'd have to guess what questions they would write. That would require me to have director level interviewing experience that I don't have. Well, it gave me that. And then I would have to have filtered those against my actual experience. I would have had to sit there and think.
Tons of additional time, right?
Yeah.
Ric, it's 11:37, so I'm a little bit conscious of your time.
I don't mind. We can keep going.
Okay.
Barely scratching the surface.
I know, that's what I was thinking. I was like, I feel like we could go for another chair, but I'm okay if you're okay with the time.
So anyway, and from what I understand, talking to a few other people, that's how people are starting to use this in the sales journey. There is we're going to get it to generate. Okay, but the averaging problem, you're not going to get it to generate content because it's going to generate average content for you, right?
And same with marketing, you're going to get marketing bland.
You're going to get bland, average,
uninteresting, unattention grabbing
thing. But what you can use it for, and this is going to be particularly relevant for people, advice in terms of people going out into the job market. What you can use it for is to research those individuals. On most of the interviews that I had, I could tell that they were not only working from my CV, but they were working from at least a summarized, if not actually seeing the content that I've been putting onto LinkedIn in the last 3 months. And I was sufficiently clued in enough in terms of what LinkedIn content am I trying to generate that I went to find the leading thought leaders, stroke coaches, who's got the most followers. And they ask, how do they generate that following? They generate it by creating thought-provoking memes.
Okay.
And then the way LinkedIn, everyone then piles in on the back of that and adds in their indication of their expertise and knowledge in those areas. Not by generating primary posting yourself. If you generate primary posting, it's only going to your connections. No, I'm not too bad. I've got 1,000 of those. So if I did that approach, it would go out and would hit a lot of people. But then you got the decision of, do I prune out my connections on LinkedIn purely on the basis of these people are no longer useful to me in terms of finding a job? I wasn't really comfortable in doing that. Then you've got the thing, do I try and grow my followers so that my primary content will hit more people? Well, that takes
That's exciting.
time, right?
Considerable effort, yeah.
Whereas if I go to Steve Bartlett and I comment on the back of his thing, then everybody who follows Steve Bartlett potentially sees that. If I write a good comment and the AI decides to push it to the top of the thing, then all his followers are going to see my content. So it's kind of decide on your job. Who are you? What role do you want to fulfill? Go and find the influences in that space. So I went coaches, product management, and then start adding authentic content to the comments of the leaders that they post, because they're all smart. They're like, here's some thoughts that people can add content to. Now you're adding value to them, and all that kind of stuff. But then when the people who are coming in behind looking for how do I take my 10,000 applications down to thing, then they've got not just your CV, but all that full content that you've added in all of those contents to go out as well. And that's how they're looking to get past the how do we filter this down.
Right, so they can see that you're adding value to the conversation online, that you're contributing to the thought leadership space in your area.
Yeah.
And they're using those as questions and as...
But it's got to be authentic.
Yeah.
It's got to look authentic. It's got to read authentic.
So no AI there?
No AI generated content, because that will... What's happening now is, the filter is coming in. Was this generated by AI? Gone.
How do they know?
Sorry?
How do they decide if it's filtered by, or if it's AI or not when you're...
Well, there's a whole load of people developing these processes.
That's a whole other thing.
That can do this. And then there's people developing like multi-chain processes to get around this. There's a whole cycle of stuff going on at the moment. And you've just got to, where am I in the zeitgeist right now? Perhaps I would, this is 3 months ago. Maybe the answer is different right now.
And did they say that did they kind of comment in the interview process that, we've seen what you've written online and we liked it?
Yeah. So the stuff that I'd said in those comments and things was either alluded to or I was asked questions on it. And because the covering letter on my CV was generated by ChatGPT, I literally went, what are the key skills required for senior product manager or product lead? And here's my experience. Produce me a 400-word opening from my CV to cover that, to give me the one-page CV. And then it's got the traditional, here are the roles and my experience in those roles to verify what I'd said on the first thing. But you could, even by the stage I got to the third interview on this hire, you could see that one of the guys, he was like, yeah, you wrote this, or AI wrote this for you, but do you really have that?
So that sounds like he's been burnt before.
There was, I mean, maybe this is a kind of, we're all in the tech industry, so we're all using AI to do everything that we can get away with and doing it for. That people have got those questions, like that skepticism naturally at the forefront of their mind. But he clearly in asking me the questions and kind of going into the more, it's like, right, now I'm going to the stuff that you didn't mention. You said that in your CV, but let's see if you really know it.
Let's check. So you're kind of being quizzed or tested then maybe a little bit more than you would have been 10 years ago.
This whole thing of how people are responding to AI, and they're looking at their role and saying, my role, or 80% of my role is under threat. And a lot of people are going, okay, what are the adjacent roles? And I need to learn those adjacent roles. And, as a product manager, I'm all about the under the water part of the iceberg that I was talking about. You need to have all of that in place in order to be able to do the thing. Someone needs to put all that AI infrastructure in place for you now in order for you to be the super productive superhuman who could do the ever decreasing bit at the top. So, and coming into the third interview, I had a phone conversation with a guy and he's like, well, we call this a product manager, but it's really solution designer, solution architect, all that kind of stuff. So I was like, right, okay, how do I prepare for that? I need to be able to do one of those FANG solution design interview questions, and I need to be able to answer that, which are kind of, how would you design Netflix, or how would you design, they give you those other things, and you
really outside the box.
and you come up with the architecture to do that. And by the time it was time to do that interview, I could go to hellointerview.com, where they had trained an AI. So again, narrow band AI, specific knowledge around solution design interviews. And I could do a solution design interview with the AI, and it would grade me on it as I went through.
Yeah.
Right. So I already had all the knowledge and the experience to be able to design the architecture for any of those things. What it gave me was the kind of exercising of going through the interview process. Right. So by the time that I hit that third interview, I aced the technical part of the conversation because I had primed myself.
So you already knew that information before. So what were the missing pieces that AI
gave me something to practice with?
At the practice, so it was just a practice.
Because what is a solution design? Final level solution. So Facebook, Amazon, blah blah. Solution. You can go onto YouTube and people will teach you.
So you got all this, but you had the information before. But when you were getting the feedback from it, what was the most useful part of the feedback that said, actually, maybe you should tweak this part of the answer, this part of the answer?
Oh no! If you didn't give us sufficient information, the AI is coming back and saying you need to add detail here. You need to add detail there. That's a good answer.
Okay. So
you've covered off these aspects that you would be expected to talk about.
So I guess what are the value parameters? So completeness of the answer is one value parameter.
Right.
Detail?
Yeah, I mean, and it kind of comes back to the open-ended question. How do you tackle the open-ended question? Well, this has been trained on what the interviewer is expecting you to respond with. So they're asking you this: design Netflix.
Yeah.
Okay, now then, what you expected, now it's been trained with what you are expected to respond with.
Okay.
So then you can go to it and you can start to respond, and it's going, not enough, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. And you do that 2 or 3 times to the point where you're volunteering all the information and not having to be kind of prompted.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot of the difficulty with these open-ended questions. You're trying to gauge what level of answer you're supposed
how much detail to go
give.
into. Yeah.
And obviously my answers, you can only give the truthful answer based on who you are and what you know, right? But my answers in that third interview, well, it went from a product manager contract to senior product manager in the interview, and they're offering me a product lead role.
Oh, fantastic.
Which the agent was flabbergasted. He's like,
so you get 2 promotions in the interview.
But I think that is because I'm hiring into a large enough organization that's clearly progressive in how it's thinking, that it can be that open-ended in trying to find people and then put them into the roles that it needs. And that kind of makes it difficult for people going into the job market as well. And I've seen this quite a lot in those kind of phishing kind of scenarios. People aren't going into the market to fill a specific role. They're going to the market looking for what individuals are out there, and then deciding how they want to restructure their organization based on the people that are available.
It's an interesting approach, right? You find the right people and then you move the organization rather than the other way around.
Or you've got some overall idea and you're doing the last shuffle.
Yeah.
And you're doing the last shuffle against people you've got in the organization as well.
It's a bit more flexible. And it's kind of what you'd have to do when you go in as a product leader. You're going to get a team and you're going to have to figure out how to best shuffle that team around.
Right. But as someone in the job market, can you target that job and be prepared for it and have had that detailed job spec that you, not anymore, I don't think. You can, it's almost a bit terrifying in that you're putting yourself, it's like, here I am, I'm putting myself out there, and then you don't get any response back.
Yeah.
They can't give you you just got to be mature enough to go, they can't give me any response back because that creates an HR liability. And they're that scared of the liability that the standard policy is we don't give feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's just there's too much downside and not that, almost no upside for them.
There's no upside for them.
Yeah.
And then you're left going, well, I went into this and I have no idea what happened, other than they re-advertised for the job 3 days later.
Yeah.
Or they re-advertised for slightly different versions of the job. And people have alluded to, I haven't seen it myself, that there's stuff going out, like they're going out with detailed job specs at senior levels, seeing what's out there. And if there's an opportunity to pick up someone with that level of experience at a discount salary, they're taking that. And then you'll see the job come out and it'll have slightly lower level skills on it, or it might state a salary expectation. Okay.
So they're using AI to get a bargain.
And and not even that. I think this is just generally where HR practice
is going.
It is at the minute, and you got to be just aware of that and just, okay, what information is communicated about this job? And therefore, what does this tell me about where this role is in that hiring process? Is this phishing? Are they just looking to get a load of CVs in and they will do some processing on that?
Just adds tons of complexity for the job hunter, right?
It's
like, am I going for a role that's phishing? Do I have to accept the salary and then go in and negotiate it because I probably know they lowballed it online anyway because they're using AI to...
Or they're doing a first pass against the market to see whether there's someone who's just come out of some traumatic redundancy process
and they're going to accept it
and is desperate for a job, and we can lowball them. Yeah. Being cynical.
Yeah.
That stuff clearly is
all
going
that
on.
sort of stuff is going on.
And then in the middle of that, you're going to get screened by AI, or you're going to get screened by HR using AI as a heads up. And I saw this happen because they had glasses on. So I could get a general...
What were the glasses doing?
No, they just had their normal glasses,
okay.
But that reflected their screen. So I could see in their glasses that they weren't just looking at me, they were looking at additional content that was generating.
So you're being recorded and it's processing your answer and sort of feeding back to the interviewer. Is that what you mean?
Right. So I'm doing a round interview with you.
Yeah.
Not only do I see you in the middle of the screen, I see the key skills required, and the AI is giving me questions to answer.
Oh, wow, okay.
And unfortunately, because the AI isn't intelligent and it's giving me all the stuff we were talking about, unless the HR person knows enough about the role that they can think critically about the questions that the AI is prompting with, they can start asking you questions. And I had this happen to me, and I was
going to ask you, were they good questions?
No. And I was like, I know that you're not using AI at this point, because I can see how AI might have led to that question. But I know that's a junior a junior or a developer question. That's not a CTO / product lead level question.
And what was the response when you said that in your most diplomatic?
No, I didn't. I didn't, because I didn't.
Kind of just tagged it.
At the time I was like, that was an odd question. What does that tell me about this role? Because it was with a company in Denmark who potentially, it was a small team, a founder who was quite a lot of kind of startup product roles are a founder who's looking to move on to the next challenge. They look to bring in a product person to do that part of the roles. If they're also a developer, then it can lead to, they also do the CTO role as well as the product role. And then the question is, what balance are they looking for? Are they looking for a product person who can do technical, or are they looking for someone who's effectively a lead developer because they are, as a founder, hands-on day to day? And the kind of questions they were asking were leading me to think that this is primarily a technical lead role, that they want to do a bit of product. But I don't know, and I suspect that the AI was leading them in that direction. They weren't thinking critically enough about those questions to go in the other direction.
Sorry, the storage is full on the phone there now. Still recording here. Can I ask you, when you were doing a lot of those technical questions and the AI website helped you to respond to those and ensure they were complete, was there any non-technical part where the AI wasn't important? Was there any like interpersonal side of it?
Yeah, so that was like one section of the interview. Then the second section was more about that. How do you work with people? What do you think about agile versus waterfall? How will you adapt to being in a kind of a more formal and process-led organization that's back in financial services? And the closer you are to the money, ironically, the more deterministic the response and process-led, the response, the more accurate everything has to be, and all of that kind of stuff. So then that's kind of, well, how much AI is the financial services industry going to adopt versus other industries? Well, potentially it's the other industries where the opportunities for AI are going to be first.
Right. It is a whole new frontier, isn't it?
And it's changing very rapidly. I think that's what everybody is struggling. Even the people who are like heavily involved are like, this is changing so quickly that, you can only make a best guess at it and kind of set a course
And figure it out as best you can as you go.
You can, but be kind of highly adaptable and accept that you could have been completely wrong 3 months ago. And now you've got to go, okay, now I've got to take a step back, readjust.
But there's no way back really, right? AI is here to stay. We have to learn to use it.
Well, here's the power of commenting on other people's posts rather than generating your own. So there's one of the leading AI players, CEO of that organization, puts posts on LinkedIn fairly often. And he's been at some conference and he posted a video through the product's website channel, not through his own. And he was making the point that the nominal cost of AI is collapsing so rapidly that it's democratizing AI and it's becoming an opportunity for everybody. And the first point that I made was, we can't tell. And we can't tell because there's massive capital inflow into investment into AI. And that's masking the true cost to the consumer. Yeah. Literally every investor in the world is piling money into all AI.
All right. So
because they don't know who the winner is.
Right.
So they're just putting all money into all of them.
Okay.
Yeah. On the assumption that when this collapses to 2 or 3 winners, that they'll be invested in those 2 or 3 winners, and that'll be sufficient to pay out on all the wasted investment.
Wow.
Because that's the level of opportunity that is there.
Yeah.
But then I said, what I like about that product was that it gives you the ability to mitigate that, because you're using one interface to access any of the models. So if one of those models disappears, it doesn't matter because you're still working through that one model. But, the potential for what happens in the future if you're reliant on AI, where we are right now is they're trying to get us hooked on AI. They're trying to get us completely reliant on AI. They're trying to get us using AI to deliver as much of the value that we deliver as possible. And then my point is, what happens when this collapses into a monopoly position is a completely different position. And someone like that, and I was further down in the conversation, and I was talking there about what is the purpose of a large language model. So the mechanism that a large language model uses to absorb human knowledge and to understand context is human communication. Without the human communication, IT can learn knowledge
all night and all day, right?
Right, without it being in human language form. There are much more efficient ways of structuring knowledge and storing it in an IT system that's not an LLM. And we're seeing the competition between humans and AI in terms of consumption of electricity in Ireland at the moment.
Mm.
And that's a thing to think about, really. So the value of AI is fundamentally tied to human language and the consumption of human language and the interaction with a human. So the value of all of those AI companies is tied to there being a human that it is conversing with.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when the person that it's conversing with has drastically lowered value because AI has taken away, has eaten part of that lunch?
Yeah.
The value of AI goes down,
Right.
because the value of the thing that it's conversing with has also gone down. So you know.
But once it goes up, has it reached a level that it doesn't need to, like, it doesn't need to go back down again, right?
So that's the unanswered question, right? Is this going to, human value is here, AI value is here, AI value is gradually eating the lunch. Is there some balancing point?
Or does it just...
Or is this going to be unstable and spiral off in one direction or another? We don't know.
Yeah.
Right? So two people like that. I went back to the first post, and the first post had been liked by the Crown Prince of Dubai on his personal account.
Very cool.
And I went to him, and I was like, "What's going to Dubai on his personal account?" And I chickened out from hitting connect.
Why?
Well, it's the Crown Prince of Dubai.
Yeah, but she's...
And kind of that evening, I got talking about it. It's like, yeah, go back. And I went back, but I couldn't see the account. The like was still there,
Okay.
but I couldn't see the account. You need to develop more of a network before you can see the Crown Prince of Dubai again. But then the other post turned out to be liked by the Crown Prince of Dubai and the First Minister for Economic Development of the United Arab Emirates. That's the power and the reach that you can get very quickly on LinkedIn at the moment by having the confidence to make original and thought-provoking comments on thought leaders' lead posts.
It's a great tip.
Yeah.
I really like it. So much to think about. And yeah, lots of great tips, from commenting on the thought leaders post to using the FANG interview websites to get really good feedback on those questions.
And there's dangers there as well, in that some of those coaches, thought leaders, they are trying to use negative sentiment in order to identify sales leads as well. Okay, so we had a load of quantitative easing coming out of what did people do with that money? They invested it in property, and they invested it in the big technical companies. Big tech companies went on hiring spree. Amazon, since 2015, has grown from 750,000 to 1.5 million employees. And now that the tap is being turned off, they have been dumping that excess employees back onto the market.
Right.
Okay. So you will see on LinkedIn posts that are about how terrible this was, how toxic managers are, how, they don't understand, and what a bunch of assholes they are. They're looking for people who are in that traumatized emotional state, who are going to respond to that and comment on it. Yeah, wankers. But what you've got to realize is that you've effectively written that on your CV. Because when you come to the interview, when you're coming to even the first pass of them looking for candidates, they're not just looking at what you wrote in your CV, they're trawling all of your LinkedIn profile and comments, and then using AI to summarize that and making a value judgment on that.
You could probably say they're looking at your other social as well.
Oh, undoubtedly.
Why wouldn't they, right? If you're...
Yeah. No, I have.
If you're hanging off a chandelier on a Saturday night and you post that on Instagram, maybe they can scrape that as well, can they?
And that comes back to the what level of tolerance is there going to have to be a tolerance reset? The the expectation is here right now, and people accept that they're not getting told the truth. Well, now if we can get that absolute truth by going out, and do we expect people to sanitize their entire
life
in order to do this, and potentially that's how things get forced.
But that circles back to the authenticity thing that you were saying. Like, you have to be authentic.
Oh, then you have to be authentic as well.
Authentic, right? So it's like, which we're really looking for people to do, right? Be authentic and say, yeah, I have a pint at the weekend, and I think that's okay. Or no, I read books, and
now I'm out in the job market and I can't find anyone to hire.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so
or people crack because everything is monitored and evaluated and judged.
And there was I did a startup 6, 7, 8 years ago. So I was using my Facebook profile to market that, and when that fell, I basically abandoned my Facebook profile. And the way Facebook had gone, it wasn't the friendship network.
Yeah, that is started with
that it had once been. But one of the things that I looked at was a service that goes out and trawls all of your social media and uses AI to, like, okay, you've got these pictures where you're drinking. Think about deleting them. You made these posts where you used a swear word. Think about go back and do you want to delete those? Yeah.
So you thought about developing this?
No, that service is out there.
That exists already.
I signed up to it and I didn't take any action because my Facebook profile was
immaculate already.
Stale. No, it was stale. Just it was stale. It wasn't immaculate. But I don't think anyone's Facebook profile.
But it comes back to the authenticity again, right? Do you want to be able to, like, if you hire someone on your team, do you want to be able to, let's say you enjoy a pint at the weekend or after work on a Thursday, do you want to hire someone who's got this totally scrubbed, perfect profile, or do you want to be able to say, look, we've put in a good shift this week.
Right.
Let's go for a pint.
And then we're back towards the kind of the buying decisions are all tribal and culture. And then they're not, based on the solution, because all the solutions have coalesced into a bland, whatever you were saying with Me Too.
Yeah. All just comes back to one sort of...
Because, I mean, what you learn as you go through your career is anything you learn in the last 5 years ago is stale, it's gone.
Yeah.
Has no value. And I think what you learn as you go through your career is how to learn quickly.
Yeah.
And how to critically filter the content that you come across, and how to research and how to focus in on the valuables.
That's a huge thing, right? Being able to separate the noise from the signal and see what's important.
And maybe that's the danger that we were talking about before with AI, in that AI is giving you the impression that it's doing that for you, but it's not doing that through critical thinking.
I think there's real risk we could become lazy with AI because we know it's going to do a certain amount of things for us.
Or that's enough of an answer. I mean, Accenture, their entire business model is, we've developed all the right answers, we've got all the right tools, you tell us your context, we'll tell you which of our rote learn, and we've got our consultants and they're all trained on our tools. And they will come to you and they will work out which of those tools to apply, and you're paying us loads of money, so you'll trust us because you're paying us loads of money.
Yeah.
Well, right. So the fact that consultant goes and he uses the Accenture relationship, or whoever you want to picked on Accenture, probably I should not have, substitute name here. The fact that they used AI to go and filter for the tool. Okay, well, that's what you're getting when you pay a consultant right now.
Yeah, yeah. So that's something to be aware of, right? That you're just getting their tools and their process that they've refined, as opposed to a very unique, bespoke thing for you.
Yeah, which might be what you want to pay for.
Yeah,
because they're saying we've done this. Let's say McKinsey, or a bunch of others that I could.
Don't worry.
Don't want to start naming all the possibilities and making myself unemployable. But
examples. No, I get it.
There's a stating point. I will make that statement on a podcast that goes on to the internet. That's ultimately now part of my CV.
Yeah, yeah. So just to clarify, you're just giving those as mere examples of consulting companies or companies that use tools, right?
Yeah, and I probably wouldn't be a cultural fit for Accenture anyway. So.
Okay. If you were to sum up, I suppose, your learnings through going through these interview processes, from using AI, what do you think was one of the biggest takeaways? Was it using the online interview feedback? Was it using the posts on LinkedIn?
I think one thing that we didn't touch on is the first thing you've got to understand is that LinkedIn is a pay-for service.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be expecting to get any value out of LinkedIn unless you're signed up on premium. And then the second part of it is getting a job. If you're getting it through those kind of channels, your primary skill is how well you use AI in navigating that process.
Well,
Yeah. It's not that, am I going to use AI? No, you're going to use AI.
it's just how good you can use it to effectively get that job.
And are you using it in the right way? Are you using it in a way that still enables you to demonstrate who you are, what your knowledge is, what your culture is, what your authenticity is? How far do you use AI before you add your tone and color to it? Do you use AI to generate that information, or do I need to do this myself? Do I use AI to accelerate my knowledge acquisition, and then I'm using that plus my experience to build on something? How can I use AI to reach out and make connections and understand which people are going to be valuable to, which people have knowledge or are doing things that is valuable to me, and bring that back to me in a summarized form that I can then, that I'm not overwhelmed by. And it's enabling me to focus in on individual areas. But ultimately, particularly in the Irish job market, there's not enough volume there for you to use AI to fully automate the process, knowing that it's only 80%. Because you as a job seeker need more efficient and more accuracy than AI can ultimately give you at this point.
Yeah. Efficiency and accuracy in terms of...
Yeah. And that's where the whole hybrid thing is kind of helped a little bit.
Yeah.
I've worked remotely for the best part of a decade. But ultimately, if you're looking for a remote job now, you've got to understand that you're up against everybody in the world. And not only are you up against everybody in the world, but you are up against the future AI workforce. Because if you can do it remotely, you've got the interface that an AI worker can do it.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about relatively high value knowledge based roles here. That's in itself, that's a niche.
Yeah. But it's definitely something that everyone needs to be keeping their eye on, keeping their finger on the pulse of this, because this is out of the bag now, and we have to learn to use it in the most effective way if we're going to stay relevant. I'm thinking about my own job, my own business as I talk to you.
Okay, so here's the kind of existential question. Right?
Yeah.
If I just do my job and my employee records everything that I do, and they are recording everything that all their workers do just by doing my job, and this is true of commenting on LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is taking all of that content and it's training AI to respond in the same way. It's like, okay, at some point, there is an AI trained to respond in the same way that I would respond, for good or for bad. So all of my knowledge, not my intelligence, my knowledge, is then captured in that AI. If you're not building that AI yourself and you're not capturing your lifetime of experience into your AI, you are handing all of your value to your employee. And this is coming up with programmers at the moment. Do they use the programming tools that the company is giving them? Or do they go and use programming tools themselves and give the company back the code that is generated? Well, if they're sensible, they do the latter, because they're still then delivering the full value to their employee.
Right.
Yeah. And even people who are generating like social media content.
Yeah.
If you're using AI to generate that social media content and you've refined your prompts down, your employer isn't going to go, that's great, you can have some time off now. They're going to say, great, do another 100 for me.
Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
And that's where that balance is going to be. Is this going to be productivity for the employees, but no difference for everybody else? Or if I train my own AI with my knowledge and I've still got proprietary ownership of that, now I can use my proprietary AI to deliver value to those people. And then I get the choice about what I do with productivity gain.
Yeah.
I've invested all of this time into this, and then I'm going to take that investment out
and innovate on top of that, or do something else on top of that, add additional value on top of that.
Or,
like, let's say,
or I'm going to spend more time with my kids.
Right. Ideally, right? If the value has been transferred to you for the work that you've input already.
Well, it's an investment. You've got to take the time to train the model. You've got to take the time to capture all.
But let's say someone
and filter it and parameterize it and all of that kind of stuff.
But let's say someone, maybe someone like me, or someone who's got like their own business. You try to put your own stamp on it. You could be a nutritionist, you could be a lawyer, you could be someone who's teaching sales. You've tried to put they're the same concepts broadly speaking, but everyone tries to put their own stamp on it, and that's part of what people maybe buy into or don't buy into, right?
And they sell into a tribe,
right? And they sign up to the tribe, right? So you put all that into the AI because you're thinking, I want to build my AI model so I can stay competitive. And you put in all your information and all that sort of stuff. And then the AI just can say, that little box you ticked at the start 5 years ago when you started this process, that has said that you have handed all your information over to us. Thanks. And now you're totally out of the loop altogether, and we can just provide prompts to people, whether it's nutrition or career coaching or legal issues.
And that is why I have this massive ethical question, and lots of people have this massive ethical question, and I'm making myself consumer choices about where I expose my knowledge.
Okay.
And which tools I am prepared to give my consumer power to based on what ethical judgment I can use about that organization. So I personally use ChatGPT to the least amount. Explicitly ChatGPT. I've used plenty of other models, and I still do use ChatGPT, and there's so much stuff is wrapped around it. You are using it anyway, because I fundamentally feel myself that they've crossed enough ethical boundaries. And why are all these venture capitalists putting the money into all of these AI companies? Because they believe that they can capture
millions of jobs.
Millions of jobs, yeah.
Millions of jobs, and then you can just find yourself taken out of the equation.
Right. So, but then there's going to be a hiring process for AI workers. So if you've got an HR or an agency at the moment, I would be like, okay, what's the hiring process for AI workers going to be? What's my acceptance criteria?
Yeah.
What's my tests? Because actually these things are sufficiently unstable and can be retrained with new knowledge and then start giving a different response, that actually, in order to have confidence that they are continuing to deliver appropriate outputs that's of value to my organization, they're going to have to be continually tested.
Right.
So, that's where there are going to be equivalents to a lot of these kind of roles. for the AI worker thing as well. And it potentially won't look that different from employing humans. But if I'm doing coaching, so there's a company called Norrie in Ireland, and the guy there made a really valuable point in terms of sales, software as a solution. So part of the proposition that they do, but it's not the true proposition. Part of the proposition is that they have a platform on which you can run a fast food to mid-tier food outlet. But the point he's making is, when I am going in and I am selling, I'm not selling my platform. I am selling consultancy on how to run the food outlet, backed up by my platform. And I think for anyone who's in that kind of culture, coaching or knowledge management, is like, how do I take parts of what I do and automate it and use these new tools to create a broader, bigger offering of which I am the top part of the iceberg.
Yeah.
The critical top part, because I have the tribe and I'm in the tribe and I have the human connection, but I'm talking to someone else who is also at the top part of their iceberg
Yeah. Well, that sounds great. If the top part of the iceberg can be kept, that can be the most fun and interesting part. And if the more administration or mundane things are taken over, then that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I mean,
if you're a one-man band, or if you're a small organization, it can be good. But I guess it will lead to people losing their jobs in the long term.
Well, and that's where people have this big question: is this going to lead to this fundamental acceleration in human society, or is it just going to make loads of people unemployed? Because ultimately, so the whole digital transformation bit, if you look at a user interface as the boundary between the human world and the digital world, if you think about like Word or any of those applications from, let's say, 20 years ago, all of the cognitive process was happening on the human side. And the digital transformation agenda has been all about, as we kind of move IT up the chain of further abstraction, of moving processes and solutions across that user interface boundary and into their digital, so that they're addressing the digital realm. Right. And making that easier and easier and easier. And, there's a certain number of deterministic processes that we've moved across that boundary. Now we're looking at a whole other range of solutions that are too complex to be addressed economically with what we've got now. And we're looking to move those across. Those were done by people. Now they're going to be done by machines. We're getting to the competition for electricity and certain primary commodities.
Yeah.
What do those people do? Now, as we structure society at the moment, there's only a few roles at the top of the iceberg. Does everybody get to be at the top of the iceberg? Is there enough? Are there economically viable problems to solve that everybody can be at the top of the iceberg?
Sounds unlikely.
And then you get into the whole paranoia of depopulation and
right. Or all those people get to pursue artistic and creative endeavors and do their hobbies more. If they're getting,
but who owns the AI?
I think
where's the knowledge being transferred to? Have I made the investment to train my own AI with my knowledge, and I am using that to deliver value to whoever, or have I handed up my knowledge and experience to someone for them to train their AI, and they're going to take all that value?
Yeah, and in that case, then those people aren't being looked after, right? Because now they're just out of a job and they're long-term unemployed. unless they can.
If I took my 25 years of experience and I give it to somebody else,
Yeah.
what value have I got left? I've
Yeah.
got no value left.
Yeah. If that's all you're offering is the knowledge, but if you're offering the complex problem solving and the relationships and the leadership.
Well, but the starting point of that is traditional knowledge.
Yeah.
You know, we call it a knowledge economy. We don't call it an intelligence economy.
Mm.
Okay, so what am I selling? I've been around for 25 years. I've seen a lot of stuff. I've internalized it. I know how to see.
But do you really still think
Well,
you're
I
selling
think-
knowledge and not like creative?
No, but
problem solving?
that's the starting point. I don't personally,
Okay.
because of the neurodivergence thing. People who can. That's where there's potential. You know, we were talking about it earlier. It's like, is there going to be increasing value put on the soft skills thing, or is there increasing value put on neurodivergent creativity? Because there's a tension between those. Someone who is neurodivergent and good at that creative solution analyzing isn't necessarily someone who's got good interpersonal soft skills.
Right.
Whereas people are going, AI, what's the left? They're going, this is the skill that everyone, we're only going to interview on soft skills.
Mm.
Well, maybe that's not the appropriate thing to interview on for that particular role.
Yeah.
And maybe you actually need to be looking for some people with ASD or ADHD or whatever it is. And I think possibly people are starting to think in that way, in that it's becoming more acceptable to talk about these things. And if the value of these things, it becomes recognizable as value, then people will be more inclined to be open about what is definitely stigmatizing at the moment.
Or if we can refine the types of roles even better by saying, oh, we've noticed that this type of person with this type of, background or makeup is particularly good here. We could allow us to place people in roles even better.
But it's by, and this is where the conversation is changing. I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was 10. So I'm 52 now. So that whole space of neurodivergence, it was, you got a diagnosis, but it was a pretty general thing. And people didn't know what that meant or what coping mechanisms were involved and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But where we are now, everything is a lot more kind of, okay, this and this means this means this.
It's got the formula.
This, and it's not, these things aren't diseases. They're not impediments even, I don't think. It's just differences. And we've identified enough of these things and given them individual labels. And we've started to realize that enough people in society fit within these boxes, that thing that we were calling normal isn't actually normal. It's a box. And it's not even the biggest box.
This is one of many boxes, right?
Right. And because now we've started talking about narcissism. And all of those, so we're like there, and we're going to peel away some of those things as well. Which I do wonder a little bit is like, kind of, if we're starting to change the language around, say we're not calling things autistic, we're just going to call it ASD. So we're normalizing the language around that. The opposite tension of that is like, if we're going to have these derogatory labels around what is actually normal, or a part of being normal, well, people are starting to create derogatory labels around some of the other kinds of not actually normal.
Yeah, I mean, I feel normality is really a spectrum. I think we're all on the spectrum. That's why it's a spectrum, right? That's what spectrums are.
Yes.
Right. And so I find it really useful if you know someone's communication style. You're like, okay, now I know this person appreciates, or they understand a lot better direct communication. Or if someone is, let's say,
right.
I've also spoken to people who consider themselves highly sensitive, in which case you have to go a bit softer. And other people, they're just going to be like, I don't know what you're saying. Can you just tell me what you mean? And then you just go super direct, and that's just like a breath of fresh air to them.
And they don't mind. And that's the world that they live in, and actually having to guess.
Yeah. So what are you
talking
trying
about?
To say, or
even, and come back to the cultural thing that we were talking about. now to understand what you're trying to say to me, I've got to understand
The culture.
the culture and the background.
Yeah.
And even within this island, that can be a very different conversation with the same words, but it's a different conversation for someone, let's say, from Antrim or versus someone from
Cork or Kerry.
Cork, Kerry, or Cork or Kerry. Yeah, a completely different conversation, potentially relatively down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Rick, I think we could talk for
we
could talk for the whole day if they let us at it. But look, it's fascinating, exciting, a little bit scary to hear about AI and the benefits and implications going forward. But really, really brilliant to hear your experiences and how you've managed to harness it and leverage it in your own job search and finding good opportunities. So thanks so much.
Well, just to try and lessen the terror a little.
Yeah, please.
So we're at that point at the moment that people are just throwing the money into it, and as a result, ChatGPT costs us €20 a month. But are already seeing people attempt to deliver AI models for programming that are $500 a month. Okay, and the question is, once that, we were talking about the growth of a product, and when it hits the top of the bell curve, what happens when people try to take the money out? Okay, and we see that in the property market. All the money's gone into buying all the property. What happens to the rental sector when people are looking to take the money out? What happens to the maintenance of the property stock in the country as a result? So the question is, when that money is there's not this huge capital inflow into AI, that people realize that it's not going to be this thing that's going to enable you to take over the world. And consumers of AI have to start bearing a substantially higher cost in order to leverage that. Where's that value balance that we were talking about between the decreasing human value and the increase in AI? Where's it going to end up? And does it result in a stable position, or does it collapse because AI becomes too expensive? And that brings us back to the whole conversation around electricity, power generation, and the discussion that's going on around data centers in Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all linked in.
Yeah. So it may be that AI goes away because ultimately the infrastructure required in order to deliver it is prohibitively expensive, and therefore the range of solution problems that it can be applied to is too limited for it to be a commercial mass scale proposition. Now everybody's betting that that's not going to be the case, but maybe it'll go away.
Well, it's interesting. Like, if not to go on another tangent, but it's interesting if you look at some developing world countries, they haven't introduced technology as much as we have. And one of the questions around that is whether either they don't have the money to do it, or they decide that having 3 people behind the counter provides 3 jobs compared to just 1 job and a computer, so that they can keep more people employed for longer. So I don't know if that's going to be an issue. Like, if we realize, let's say in our government, that we can sack 30%, now we just create this other problem for politicians, which is all these people are unemployed now and they need to be on the dole.
So that is the discussion on colonialism and which side of that you fall on. In that a lot of those, let's just say, African nations, in the process in the 60s of them devolving from direct military colonial ownership to what followed, effectively the colonial powers involved discovered that there was a more efficient way of maintaining the influence they required over the resources that those countries had, without them going to the effort of physically dominating those countries.
Right.
They loan them loads of money. And they catch that around contracts, around mineral and resource extraction and all of that kind of stuff. And you've seen the same kind of critique of that in terms of what China is supposed to be being up to in the last however long. So human beings are extraordinarily resourceful. They'll find a way with what they have available. And if you have a significant capital outflow from your country because you're post-colonial, then the only way that you have of addressing problems is by having lots of people. The traditional answer.
So that's more of a post-colonial issue than a technology issue.
It's an access to capital issue.
Okay.
And I'm just highlighting in that way that might sound a bit lefty, but it's more to say that kind of in that very big picture, the reason that they find solutions based on having lots of people is because they don't have the capital in order to invest into alternative kind of capitally intense solutions, you know.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I didn't know, but that makes sense. That's just one of those effects of the post-colonial.
And then the question for us is, you know, we're on the plus side right now in the West. If that barrier exists, are we still on the plus side? Are we on this side? I kind of mentioned the property market for a couple of reasons. In that, if you've got an enormous overseas investment in your property market, what they've effectively done is turn this country into a battery. They have invested, so they've taken their, let's say, $5 million. They bought a property with it. Now they're going to look to get their $12 million back over a period of time. They've stored their value in our property, and then they're going to look to extract that value from us.
Yeah. Indefinitely. Yeah.
And because they are extracting the value, and this comes down to the economic development of just like areas of Dublin, right? If they're going to extract that value, that means that part of the value that would have stayed in that area in order to maintain those properties, which property owners will do,
Of course,
is now being extracted and leaving the country. And that's where stuff like the Preston model comes in, or the circular economy, where you're looking to make buying decisions that keep value in your economy and getting used multiple times, even though that might mean that the initial purchase is more expensive.
Yeah. You always want to have skin in the game. You always want to have people invested in the area if they're buying something. Property in Ireland, as you know, is a whole other can of worms.
Right. But I think it's an example that people can, when you explain it in that way, people can kind of get their head around. Look, I would have been paying the same money in a mortgage. Yes, you would have owned the property, and you would have brought, through doing work, you would have brought capital into the area, and you would have used it in that area.
Yeah.
Whereas the rental situation creates the opposite model. It's where we're bringing capital into the area through our work, but then that capital is large proportions of that capital immediately leaves again. Same as if I buy a TV and I buy it from Amazon, that money has immediately left Ireland. It's gone. If I buy a TV from Power City or Harvey Norman, at least part of that money stays in Ireland and gets used again. Something good happens in Ireland as a result of me buying local.
Yeah.
In a way that it doesn't if I buy on Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah, don't worry. You'll get a call from an American lawyer in the next few days. But yeah, like being able to tap into that circular economy and keep money in the country and keep interest in the country is a huge thing. Do you know what I'd love to do? I'd love to, and I'll put this out there, but you know, we'll see how the dust settles with you. But I'd love to chat to you again next year and just see how everything pans out, because a year would be quite a long time, right? Now, I don't know whether that's going to suit you or not, but we'll have to see next year.
Yeah.
But I think that'd be very interesting to see how this conversation lines up and with next year
With
and,
what
and
happens.
and just developments in general. Like, have we seen more adoption of AI? Has the price increased? Are people losing their jobs more and more, or is it just more a case of getting upskilled in jobs? Are recruiters relying on it as a primary headhunting tool? I think that'll be really interesting. So if it's okay with you, I'll contact you next year and see.
Yeah. I'll try and end. Every time I try and end this, we try and end this conversation, we're kind of going on to further.
I've got 3 more topics.
Further stuff, yeah. So we're going to end up on what do people need to be about AI? Everybody needs to be curious, at least.
That was a great final sign off. So look, thanks so much, Rick. I really appreciate your time. Super fascinating talking to you. As I said, I've got 3 more topics in my head that I could keep going with, but I won't. So look, thank you so much. Really appreciate you dropping in.
No problem at all.
That is Ric Morris. And what's your official title?
Huh?
What's your official title? Product leader?
I'm a technical product lead.
Technical product lead. So we finished with the introduction. Thanks again. You're very good.
Cheers.